And on to that point, we'll get right into it. I know everybody has some limited time. So again, we're going to be talking about the M-633D digital mixing unit today. And a brief overview of what we're going to be discussing is features and benefits, front and rear panel control, sound improvement and functions, some DSP that's built into this unit, which includes automatic resonance control known as ARC, as well as feedback suppression, and we'll look at a couple different applications that this unit is quite useful in. So the one thing about the M33D, which is key, is that it's very simplistic to use. It's one-touch digital mixer. So although it has a form factor of an analog mixer with controls and dials in the front, the processing within it is all digital. However, you do not need a PC or anything like that to configure it. It's all done via push switches on the front or on the rear of the unit. A big advantage of the M633D is that it will eliminate unpleasant reverberation and feedback to deliver clear and accurate sound. So we'll get into some of those features here. So as I mentioned, it's push button to select and operate the unit itself. We will get into the automatic resonance control and the specifics of how that functions, as well as talk about automatic clip guard. And just to note that this unit is a one rack size unit, so it doesn't take up too much real estate in your rack. So with regards to the ARC, or automatic resonance control, basically it's an algorithm that is built into it that improves speech intelligibility and sound in facilities that maybe have acoustically challenging environments. So example would be gyms with very reflective surfaces, concrete walls, hard floors. House of worship is another key area where this performs quite well, again, because there's not a lot of acoustic treatment in some of these facilities. So the ARC functionality will allow the system to, quote unquote, self-EQ and take some of those issues out of play. Additionally, with the feedback suppression, that is built into the microphone channels on the M633D, which will automatically EQ out treble frequency when the person does move around with that microphone and maybe gets a little too close to a speaker or so on in that environment. Last function we will talk about is the automatic clip guard. So when the input sensitivity is set to either mic with or without phantom power on, the sensitivity is automatically adjusted depending on the level present. So again, you don't have to worry about overdrawing of the signal on the input. The system itself will realize what that level is of the input and switch it automatically so you don't get overdriving of a channel. So getting into the specifics of inputs and outputs, so it does have 6 mono microphone or line inputs. Each of them will deliver phantom power at 24 volts DC. In addition, it has 3 stereo outputs, 6 mono RCAs on the rear. So this could potentially feed, the 6 mono are on the rear and the 3 are on the front. It does have 2 mono outputs, my mistake, and 1 stereo output. So we could have, in essence, 3 outputs from this particular unit. And we do have a stereo output for recording or feeding, maybe assistive listening or something like that. There is a 3.5 stereo jack on the front as well. There is switches for automatic mute, your clip guard, as well as independent control for mixing to your outputs, which is on the front panel, which will get a better, closer look here as we move forward. And there we have the front control of the M633. And if we look at the, let's try to get a pointer here. 1 second. So if you look at the bottom left-hand side, we see the feedback suppression switches. So in each one of the mono micro inputs, you can choose to have the feedback suppression engaged or not engaged. And again, so that is key on the microphone side of things. You'll see the controls for the stereo inputs, 1, 2, and 3, in the center of the unit as well. We have an ARC switch just to the right of the last of the stereo pots, which is an overall switch to control the overall audio and EQ of that of the unit itself in that room. And we also, to the right of that, have a stereo input jack. So just a local input if someone wants to plug in their local MP3 or something like that as a source to go through the system. As you zoom in a little bit, you'll get to see what I mentioned about the output channel sizing. So if you look on the left-hand side, we'll see those are our microphone inputs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the controls for each one of those channels is similar to the next. So we have output assignment 1, 2 are stereo. So we could have a left, right, center. We could have 3 zones. We could have subs as well as main full range speakers, depending on how you want to configure the system and what the requirement asks for. So that is assignable for each individual. So you could, in essence, also have input or mono microphone 1 going to output 1 and microphone 2 going to output 2, so they don't interfere. So it's a little bit of simplistic matrixing as well that can happen there on those potential 3 outputs for each of the inputs. You do have the basic gain control, which is your volume control for and mixing capabilities on the unit. And as mentioned before, your feedback suppression is seen there, the buttons for each one of those microphone inputs. You do have indication as well for your level, just to verify you do have signal coming through in those particular channels. Moving over to the next section, to the right of the microphones is the 3 stereo inputs. So again, very similar in their form factor as the microphones. You've got your output channel assignments for your line level input sources, so they are stereo in nature. You do have the choice to mono or stereo those, so if you do want a stereo field in your design, you have that option, or you can mono them, which takes the left and right and monos them together. Again, input gain control. To the right of that, we have the overall ARC processor to engage that, which again we'll talk about a little bit in a few more slides, and an indicator just to say that the ARC is engaged. And to the very right of the unit, looking at those mentioned prior, the output selection, we have gain controls for mono 1, mono 2, and your stereo output. And finally, we have the stereo 3.5 jack input as well. And of course, the power on and off. Looking on the rear, on the left-hand side, of course, you've got your AC power outlet. Then we have your Phoenix connectors for your output zones, so your left and right stereo and your 1 and 2 monos. We have your recording out, as I did mention too. So again, that could be for a recording device or assistive listening. RCA stereo inputs, which are on the rear. We have auto muting capability built in there as well, so that's a switch that is just beside the stereo inputs. And from the rear there, we've got our mono inputs. Again, they are microline switchable, and you have Phoenix connectors on those as well. So talk a little bit about the ARC control, the functionality there. That's what really makes this piece invaluable. Because as you may be aware, we're seeing a lot of facilities that do get designed, especially if they're new, to look very sleek and pretty and modern. But a lot of times that causes the audio to be a little bit trickier because there are so many reflective surfaces and not a lot of materials to absorb the sound in these energy-prone rooms. So you've all probably been in a room with a long, high reverberation. So someone's talking and one word starts to bleed into the next one. It is because of that energy that's building up within that room, that reverberation. So that's basically when the original sound is interfered with reflecting waves. So you have sound that is bouncing off the ceiling, it's bouncing off the side walls, it's bouncing off the rear walls, and all these waves are hitting your ears at various different delayed times. So that's reverberation that you're hearing. So certain frequencies play a different role in that because, again, when you talk about speech and intelligibility, there's certain frequencies that are a little bit more key than others. And again, depending on the room, they may be a little bit more prone for low frequency reverberation and buildup than higher frequency. Each room is quite different. But again, that's the trouble that we're trying to overcome with this unit in this ARC processing. So what it does is it automatically compensates for the resonant sound within that room. So example, gymnasiums and similar places. So with the ARC engaged, it sees those troublesome frequencies and automatically EQs and compensates for those runaway frequencies and suppresses it. So it does an acoustic analysis of the room, and I'll kind of jump ahead one spot here. kind of give you a picture of it. So you see we do connect a microphone to the input of the M-633 up ahead of the speakers in that particular room. Let's say it is a gymnasium. And we hit that arc button, it goes through a series of tests that'll look at the distances between the speakers and the microphones and those standing waves within the room that are creating the issue of lack of intelligibility because of reverberation. So it'll go back and do an analysis of the sound field and automatically pull in a good range of filters to make sure that that room is a little bit more controlled and you have that intelligibility level that is required in that house of worship or in that gymnasium at the push of a button. So it's very simple. You don't need a real-time analyzer and a lot of test gear to get in there and EQ that room. This takes that guesswork out of it. So really simple, easy setup and configuration. And again, it does, you know, it would be nice if the room did have acoustic treatment, and that'll always add to how this does function. But in those cases where that's an oversight, it's really amazing how this can clean up the audio field in those troublesome rooms. So again, very simple. Press the arc button, have the, a microphone out in front. In the manual, it does go into depth on how that's set up and exactly the distance that microphone should be from the speakers, but it's very, very simple and straightforward. Of course, the better quality of the microphone, the better. If you have a flat response measurement microphone, that'll be a little bit more accurate, but it is designed to work with a standard microphone. Next, we'll get on to the feedback suppression. Number 2 problem in these spaces, again, because they are quite reverberant. Feedback is that noise when you've got you're talking into a microphone and maybe you're getting in front of that speaker, so your speech is being amplified through an amplifier. It's going back out of the speaker, and that microphone's picking up that amplified speech. So you've got basically a loop of amplification that gets louder and louder and louder and out of control. So that high pitch squeal we've always heard, whether it's in a public speaking application or at a live concert or venue, that tends to run away and someone tends to run to the soundboard and turn something down. So this takes that guesswork out of it. It takes the need to have someone operating the sound system away. So again, we look at a school gym or a smaller house of worship, which may not have someone trained or a person available to man the sound system. This unit will basically look at these frequencies, and if they start to run away, they'll do an automatic equalization of them. In the next slide, you'll kind of see what it does here. So basically, the unit is looking at the frequencies and basically the audio waveform in that space. So you've got 20 hertz, your low frequency on the left, up to your 10K. And once it starts seeing a frequency run away, we're probably at around the 3K area that, or 3.5K. Then what it will automatically do is notice that, reverse that peak and drop it out and clip it off of the waveform. So it automatically, you might get a little yelp, small little sound, and it'll just disappear automatically. So it does EQ that frequency out, but it also does self-monitor. So once it notices, hey, that frequency's range is no longer an issue. So again, maybe that person walking around in that space is no longer directly in front of the speaker that's creating the issue, then it will automatically put that frequency back in so it doesn't color the sound or take away from intelligibility at the same point. So it is an intelligent, it doesn't set at once and start EQing and pulling these frequencies out. It's continually looking, sampling, and adjusting depending on what it's sensing for those frequencies and whether there is any runaway. So again, as we notice on the front of the unit, each one of those microphones inputs has that button. So it's as simple as one button. So you've got one button for acoustic resonance control, and you have one button for feedback suppression on the mono inputs. So very simple and easy to configure. Again, no PC to do so. So we'll quickly jump into some applications. I mentioned house of worship. It's a big one. For many reasons, again, because these spaces tend to be fairly reverberant, high ceilings, not a lot of acoustic treatment. It does help, you know, when there are people in the seats, but depending what function is going on and what time of year, if it is full, you know, having people in the seats is going to absorb sound, but when it's not full, then again, you don't have that sound absorption factor, so acoustics and reverberation comes into play. Again, there may not be an area where someone can control the sound or someone available to control the sound during every use of the room. So having a system that automatically can adapt to certain instances is very, very much key. So look at some gear at a typical house of worship. So we've got the M-633D as the main unit. So again, you've got your microphone inputs, your 6 inputs, your 3 stereos. We're feeding to our DA250F, a 4-channel 250 watt per channel amplifier. And from there, we're going to our line array speakers. The line array speakers are going to help control where the sound and the sound reinforcement is being sent. So we're keeping sound potentially off of the ceilings and direct it right where it needs to be. Every little key choice of product is going to help, again, with the reverberation factor in those rooms. So again, we do have a couple microphones here, which may be podium microphones, and of course you're only going to have your wireless microphones in these spaces as well. So the M633 is going to measure the acoustics of the church, whether it's church, temple, or mosque, and basically self-adjust, self-EQ, and add speech clarity to that room throughout that space. In addition, it is going to offer that feedback suppression in that area as well. At a budget type price, again, instead of when you get into acoustic treatment, what that may require in a certain area, it can be quite pricey. So this would be a helpful function to treat these troublesome areas. And again, when it comes to buttons and knobs and control, it's very simple. Once it's set up, it's a matter of, hey, I want to turn up microphone 1 or 4 or 3 or maybe a music source through one of the line level inputs, and that's it. There's not too many buttons to be played with, and things like that can be too confusing. So it's nice and simplistic when they don't, when the facility may not have a person dedicated to its use. Gymnasiums, well, you can tell by looking at that there's, geez, I'm looking maybe part of the mesh and maybe the flag is probably all that's absorbing anything there, maybe some of the roofing material. So again, very reverberant spaces, dealing with limited budgets. If it's a new school or if it's a retrofit, a lot of times they're trying to raise funds to upgrade these systems. And again, putting acoustic panels in there can be quite pricey, as well as you're dealing with a facility that's taking abuse. So putting panels on the walls when they're going to hit by balls and various other sporting equipment, again, could probably deteriorate their condition fairly quickly as well. So gymnasium is a nice fit for the M633D. So look at a sample type of system for a gymnasium. So again, the center focus is on the M633D. Again, looking at 6 microphones and 3 lines, that'll generally suffice for the requirements of those type of rooms. We've got our wireless microphones at the top, so our True Diversity 5000 series microphones, whether it's with handheld or lavalier style. We can plug in your audio source player into the 633. And we have some options here, and I did mention that you can zone this particular unit out. So we've got mono output 1, mono output 2, and stereo output. So in this essence, we're maybe going to look at a gym that separates into 2 different sections, or maybe it's a scenario where we have a stage as a gym on one side of the stage and a cafeteria on the other side. So that would be 2 zones. So with that zone functioning output of the 633, we can say, okay, to plan A or area A, could be gym A, we're going to take output 1, and we're going to feed a DA250FH, and hook up our SRT5 line arrays, ruggedized. On a note on those SRT5s that they're fully impact resistant and warranted to do so, so they're great for an application such as a gymnasium where, again, you're going to get a bunch of equipment thrown at them from time to time. So that's one particular zone there. So we could say mic 1 to 3 is going to go to output A, and we could have a line level source going to mono output A, so that's one system. And then we could look at microphones 4, 5, and 6, and line input 2 that's going to go to output mono output 2. So that, again, that could be another part of a gym, or it could be the cafeteria. In this scenario, we've got our HX5s, so and some stage monitors there as well. So we could take care of that application, well, sound reinforcement and the stage monitors through the M633, because we do have that total of 6 total outputs in that area. So again, you know, the RFU's got to help reduce the reverberation, take care of the resonance frequencies that are running away there, and improve clarity and speech intelligibility. That's the main key, is that speech intelligibility. We've all been in those spaces where it's very reverberant, and once you get more than a couple words into a sentence, you start to lose what the message is. So this will definitely take care of most of those issues out there.